The first time I noticed the stakes in the sand, I assumed they were survey markers. My shoreline had always been quiet, too quiet, some people said. A long strip of pale sand curving along the edge of the bay, broken only by tufts of seagrass and the occasional driftwood log. It wasn't glamorous like the resort beaches farther south. There were no umbrellas, no jet skis screaming across the water, no bars selling overpriced cocktails. Just wind, waves, and silence. That was exactly why I loved it. I inherited the land 3 years earlier after my grandfather passed away. The property stretched across nearly half a mile of coastline, land he had purchased decades ago when the entire area was little more than marsh and scrub. Back then, everyone told him it was worthless. He disagreed. Grandpa always said, "One day people will realize that the last quiet places are the most valuable ones." For the most part, I had left the shoreline untouched. I lived in a small cedar house on the bluff above the beach and worked remotely as a marine mapping consultant. My office window looked out across the water. Every morning I watched the tide roll in and out like a slow breath. The land wasn't unused. It was simply undisturbed. But apparently, someone else had decided that meant something different. It started with trucks. One Monday morning, I heard the rumble of engines drifting up from the beach road below the bluff. At first, I assumed it was the county maintenance crew. They sometimes came down to clear debris after storms. But when I looked through my binoculars, I saw something odd. 3 pickup trucks, a trailer, and 6 men unloading equipment. They weren't wearing county uniforms. They were hammering long wooden stakes into the sand at regular intervals. Survey markers. I frowned. No one had contacted me about any work along the shoreline, and I owned every inch of the beach down to the high tide line. I grabbed my jacket and drove down the dirt access road. By the time I arrived, the men had already placed nearly 20 stakes. One of them looked up as I approached. "Morning," he said casually. "Morning," I replied. "What exactly are you doing on my property?" He blinked. "Your property?" "Yes." He turned toward another man wearing a white hard hat. "Hey, Mark," he called. "You might want to talk to this guy." The man in the hard hat walked over holding a clipboard. "Can I help you?" "I'm the owner of this land," I said. "So, yes, you can start by explaining why you're surveying my shoreline." He studied me for a moment. Then, he flipped through the papers on his clipboard. "Well, that's interesting." "What is?" "These plans show this stretch as undeveloped public shoreline." I stared at him. "That's not correct." He shrugged. "Look, we're just the survey team. Our client is preparing the site for Marina construction." The word hit me like a wave. "Marina." "Private Marina," he corrected. My eyes moved across the stakes stretching along the sand. Dock lines, boat slips, fuel access points. They were mapping out an entire marina right on my beach. I felt my jaw tighten. "Who hired you?" He hesitated. "Harbor Crest Development." I had never heard of them, but something told me that was about to change. That afternoon I drove into town and visited the county planning office. The clerk at the front desk pulled up the development records. "Oh yes," she said. "Harbor Crest submitted a preliminary concept last month." "For my land." "Well, technically the application lists the shoreline parcel as unused coastal frontage. It's privately owned." She looked confused. "Let me check the parcel map." 5 minutes later she returned with a different expression. "Oh, what?" "You're right. That land belongs to you." "Then why were survey crews on it this morning?" She scrolled through the permit documents again. "Because Harbor Crest claims the shoreline was abandoned." "Abandoned?" I repeated. "Yes. They filed under the assumption that the land had no active use." "That's not how property ownership works." She gave an apologetic smile. "Developers sometimes take creative interpretations." I looked them up that night. Harbor Crest Development specialized in luxury coastal projects, condos, yacht docks, waterfront resorts. Their newest proposal was called Bayview Private Marina. The marketing renderings showed gleaming docks stretching into the water, rows of expensive yachts, restaurants, and an exclusive members club. And the shoreline in the images looked exactly like mine. My quiet beach had been turned into a glossy sales pitch. According to the proposal summary, the marina would include 60 private boat slips, fuel docks, a parking lot for 120 vehicles, a waterfront borough maintenance facility, and the entire thing would sit on the stretch of sand they labeled as unused coastal frontage suitable for development. Unused. I leaned back in my chair. They hadn't asked. They hadn't called. They had simply assumed that because no building stood on the beach, no one cared about it. That assumption was about to cost them. 2 weeks later, heavy equipment arrived. Excavators, bulldozers, flatbed trucks carrying piles of timber. I drove down immediately. A temporary fence had been installed across the access road. A sign hung from it, Harbor Crest Development, future site of Bayview Marina. My blood pressure spiked. Workers were already grading the sand near the waterline. I parked and walked straight through the open gate. A supervisor stepped forward. "Sir, this is an active construction zone." "Yes," I said. "On my property." He sighed like he had heard this before. "You'll need to contact Harbor Crest's legal department."
No, y replica calmly.
"You need to stop digging." He crossed his arms. "We have permits." That word made me pause. Permits from who? The county planning office. That didn't make sense. I had just been there. Then I remembered something. County planning permits were only the first step for coastal construction. The real authority came from somewhere else. The Coastal Commission. And I had a strong feeling Harbor Crest had skipped that step. The next morning I called the Regional Coastal Commission office. A woman answered. "Coastal Development Department." "My name is Daniel Harper," I said. "I own Shoreline property at Crescent Bay. Construction started yesterday for a marina project." She typed something. "Yes, I see a preliminary inquiry from Harbor Crest. Do they have an approved coastal development permit?" Silence. Then no. I smiled slowly. "Are they allowed to build without one?" "Absolutely not." "Then you might want to come take a look." 3 days later, 2 Coastal Commission vehicles pulled into the construction site. Work stopped almost immediately. I watched from the bluff as officials walked across the sand with clipboards and cameras. They measured. They photographed. They spoke with the construction supervisor. An hour later, the site went quiet. Excavators shut down. Workers gathered around the trucks. One of the officials walked to the fence and posted a bright orange notice. I drove down. The supervisor looked furious. "Did you call them?" "Yes," I said. "You just shut down a multi-million-dollar project."
No, y replica.
"You did when you started building illegally." That evening my phone rang. "Mr. Harper," a man said smoothly. "Yes." "This is Victor Lang from Harbor Crest Development." His tone was calm but tight. "I understand you contacted the Coastal Commission." "I did." "You could have called us first. You could have asked permission before building on my land." A pause. "We believed the shoreline was unused. It's privately owned." "Well, technically the beach area falls under certain public access interpretations." "No," I interrupted. "It doesn't." He changed tactics. "Perhaps we can come to an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" "We're prepared to purchase the shoreline parcel." "I'm not selling." "We're offering a very generous price." "I'm still not selling." Another pause. "You're standing in the way of a development that will bring millions of dollars to the region. And you're standing on land that doesn't belong to you." His voice hardened. "This isn't over." I smiled slightly. "No," I said. "It's just getting started." 2 months later the case went to a formal review hearing. Harbor Crest applied for a retroactive coastal permit, hoping the commission would approve the marina after construction had already begun. But the situation had become complicated. Very complicated. Because during the investigation, the Coastal Commission discovered several problems. Major problems. For example, the marina would destroy a protected eelgrass habitat. It would disrupt tidal flow patterns. The shoreline supported nesting shorebirds. The project lacked environmental impact assessments. And, perhaps most importantly, the landowner, me, had not given permission. At the hearing, Harbor Crest's lawyers argued that the shoreline had been functionally unused for decades. They said development would activate the economic potential of the bay. When my turn came to speak, I stood at the podium. My grandfather bought that land 50 years ago, I said. He preserved it because he believed quiet places mattered. I looked at the commissioners. Just because land isn't covered in buildings doesn't mean it's empty. The room was silent. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do with a place is leave it alone. 2 weeks later, the ruling arrived. The Coastal Commission denied the permit. Not only that, they issued enforcement penalties for illegal construction activity. Harborcrest was ordered to remove all construction materials, restore the disturbed shoreline, pay environmental violation fines. The Marina project was officially dead. A month later, trucks returned to the beach. But this time they weren't bringing equipment. They were taking it away. The stakes disappeared. The grading was smoothed over. Seagrass slowly reclaimed the disturbed sand. One evening, as the sun set over the water, I walked down the shoreline. The beach looked almost the same as it had before. Quiet, empty, peaceful, and used according to developers. But not to me. And not to the pelicans gliding across the bay, or the herons standing in the shallows, or the tide that continued its slow rhythm against the shore. Grandpa had been right. The last quiet places were the most valuable ones. And this one was staying exactly the way he left it.